Hello everybody, my name is Tim Skipper. I am a amateur comic book artist, business owner. I own my own comic book business, doing sales, and so it gives me some free time to do something I really enjoy, which is draw and paint. And this is part 2 of me painting the Spawn #1 cover with acrylics. My camera, I didn't hit the record button properly or there was a malfunction. It missed the very opening of the second part. All I did was take some burnt umber on a sponge and wet it down really good and splot it around the back to give me some darker shadows. And then I came in with some green gold and titanium white to make some edges of clouds. Now I'm using brushes to try and create some splatter effect, and I had a little bit of trouble finding a brush that would give me the splatter effect I wanted. I think in the end I ended up with just toothbrushes, yeah. So using toothbrush to create splatter effects, and you can see I made some tracing paper masks to keep the splatters off the title and Spawn's head. I didn't worry too much about the cape because I knew that was going to be mostly dark and close to black back there. Kind of wish I had of, because it did cause me some headaches later on, but it all worked out in the end. So I did some teal color, and then I came back in with some black. After this, I hit it with a hairdryer to get this. I wanted a little bit darker, and off camera I hit it one more time with a teal aerosol can of acrylic paint, and that kind of gave me my final effect that I wanted. I just hit it very lightly with a spray can and basically just blended all those colors together. Normally I would have used a glaze, but this paper just could not handle that much water, so I went the spray can route. The nice thing about the spray can is it does give you a really neat texture to work into, especially when you do color pencil, which I'll be doing in this project. Here I'm redrawing my lines for the cape. I did not have to do this, but it does help keep me in line with where everything is. I don't consider myself a painter, more of someone who draws and colors his drawings with paint. So the more line work I have to help me build from, the more likely I'm going to do it. I'm getting out some Liquitex hard body black acrylic paint to paint in my shadows. I should have used a soft body because the hard body ended up getting too thick in some areas and causing some texture that I didn't want, but you know, in the end it worked out okay. I think the reason I grabbed it, I had just done a very large painting, a 30 by 48 painting, and I had used, it was on canvas, and I had used the hard body on that, and I just sort of grabbed it by habit, and I should have just grabbed one of the mini bottles of soft body paint I had, but in the end it all works out. So right now all I'm doing is trying to figure out where my lights and blacks are. I know I want the light to come from the right side of the image where Spawn is facing, so I'm just adding in some solid blacks and bits of gray with dry brush. This, of course, will get painted over with glazes and so forth, and all this will disappear under the paint, but excuse me, gives me an idea of where I'm going in terms of the final piece, in terms of value and so forth. Now this is obviously not how fast I paint. I think I sped this up about 4 times normal speed. I did try it at 8 times to try to make this video as short as possible, but at 8 times it was just way too fast, and so I compromised at 4 times normal speed. I wish I could paint this fast. I could get so much more done. If you're like me and you're learning from videos, being self-taught, you've got to remember that a lot of these videos are sped up, and you've got to take your time to get things right, or as close to right as we can as we're learning. I still got a lot to learn. one of the things I was running into is the paint splatters with the paper was really soaking up the paint quickly. So I'm having to dip the brush more frequently than normal because there's no gesso on this. Usually I'm painting on top of gesso, either white or clear gesso, and so I'm painting directly into the paper, and it is soaking up the paint extremely fast. So these first few layers, I get 1 or 2 strokes, and then I'm having to redip the paint, wet the brush again. It was a tedious process, and again, because the paper is not designed for this, it was really just planned for you to do pencil and maybe some pen and ink. It's not really designed to take this much water, so that was a major concern for me too. I didn't want the paper to rip. You can see on the edges it's starting to curl, but that doesn't worry me too much. I know I can get it flat again, but I didn't want the paper to rip because of all the water being added to it. So that was my biggest concern. A lot of things I normally do later on that I didn't do this, like scumbling and so forth. And again, that was just fear that the paper would not hold up to it. This technique here I'm using is as best as I can understand similar to what Simon Beasley does. I'm not saying it is exactly the way Simon Beasley does it, but it's similar, and other artists like him, I've seen them in videos use something very similar to this. And for me, not considering myself a true painter, this just makes more sense. Lay in some solid blacks, do a few pencil strokes for some grays, and then glaze color over that. And to me, that just makes more sense mentally. I can picture what I need to do better than, you know, the people who start with a burnt sienna and they don't even have a drawing. They'll just start painting with burnt sienna and create the artwork from nothing with a paint. I need that line art underneath, at least at this point in my ability, and I just don't have the ability to see it like that, and I certainly don't think I have the ability to execute it. As I got done with that, I brought out a black Prismacolor pencil. I didn't trust with the paper the way it was dragging the paint and giving me weird streaks. I didn't trust to go in with a brush around his head, so wanting to have more control, I decided to use a pencil to lay in shadows on Spawn's head there. And I didn't have a very clear reference of what his profile looked like. I had the little 3/4 up there in the corner that I was kind of basing everything off of, and hoping that I had it pretty close to the way Spawn looks. I think the last issue of Spawn I read was like issue number 11 or 12, and I didn't keep reading the series after that. So it's been a few years. Once I get done with that, I got out some alizarin crimson. This is a very brownish red. It's very cool. It's the coolest red I have as far as color temperature, and I use that. I used it in my most recent large painting I did with Dead Man and Spectre, and that was a 30 by 48 painting on canvas, and I used it as a base color for Dead Man there as well. It's not quite purple, but it leans closer in that direction, and it gives me a very nice cool red to work into. And so here I'm using a spray bottle to help me get the paint on there and get it to spread a little bit more evenly. And you can see it's also causing some problems where the paint is not completely dry as I spray, and I'm getting some runoff that I don't want, and I'm using Q-tips to clean up. That is one thing I can say about painting in acrylics. Keep you a good supply of Q-tips close by. They are great as erasers. You wet one end in water and use it to lift up the paint, then come back with a dry end and clean it up, and it works great. I am having a little bit more trouble here because of all the texture I laid down with a spray paint that I normally don't have, but it still works. As I'm going here, I'm trying not to get into my tombstones. And you can see there on the back of the cape, I got a big mess. It just was not working right. And right there is where my camera crashed. So my camera crashed and I didn't realize it till after I finished the head. So here we are. I'm coming in to clean up the head. The head was done with burnt umber and ultramarine blue with some unbleached titanium white for the highlights, and then I came in with some Prismacolor pencils to clean up the edges and work out the fine detail. And for the eye, I painted the eye with a titanium white and then brushed over it with Liquitex green gold. Here I'm using a Faber-Castell Scarlet colored pencil. I think it's pencil number 128 or 129 if that matters to you. But usually I do this in paint, but I thought, well, if I lay this down with pencil, and since I've got so much grit on the paper, the pencil's laying down really nice. I have more control over a pencil than I do a paintbrush at this point, and I'm not adding more water to this paper. So, and then it gives me the benefit that when I come back in with paints later, you know, I'm painting on the waxy surface of the pencil, not directly into the paper. So, several different reasons why I'm doing this, mainly to make sure that the paper survives all the way to the very end of this painting. But this does kind of give sort of a grainy effect because of the blending that you can and can't do with pencil versus paint. But in the end, it turned out really good. I was very pleased with it. Working my way around with a color pencil. Once I started getting to the back of the cape, I had to think about where light was falling, because you don't want the same color everywhere, because light isn't falling everywhere. You know, there's going to be some parts lost in shadow. So you'll see that I'm starting not to put that red into certain places, and I'm hoping that it will fool the eye into creating some shadow and depth. A lot of what I do is hope, because I'm still learning. This does wear out a pencil, however. You have to sharpen it quite regularly. I know Drew Struzan, in his video that I have, he teaches how to hold the pencil properly. I do not follow that teaching. I really should, but I've tried, but I've never quite grasped exactly how he's holding the pencil and twisting it to keep the lead from going dull so quickly. Old habits die hard, I guess. You can see there that the cover is starting to lift on the edges from the bulkling. You'll also see while I'm doing this that there's tracing paper. I have tracing paper directly underneath the cover, between the cover and the first and last page, to protect it from any accidental paint splatters getting underneath, so that the interior pages don't get messed up. And then there's tracing paper underneath the fold out of the spread to protect the paper from the board. That's an old cutting board from the kitchen that I quit using. I'll use it as a small paint board when I paint small projects and I don't want to get paint everywhere. Another Faber-Castell pencil, a little bit darker red and more of a maroon, kind of working those shadows there, and then coming back with that scarlet pencil, picking up some more highlights. You can see I got a little bit of a red tint where I had a little bit of bleed from the color. and I'm not even going to worry about it. To me, those little accidents, especially on a project this small, just add to the character of the project. And as far as anyone knows, I did that on purpose. Just don't tell them that I didn't. Again, with a darker color pencil, emphasizing some shadows. And even coming in with some black to really push those shadows further back. If this had been on canvas or illustration board, I would have done a glaze here. Since I'm not doing a glaze, I'm going straight into, this is Liquitex acrylic gouache scarlet red. It's not really a gouache, it's more of just a matte acrylic. I don't know why they even bother putting gouache in the title. But I'm using this to create a red highlight. Red's a tricky color. You know, once you start pushing the highlight, the lighter portions of it, adding white, you know, you start going to pink. If you add yellow, you start going to orange. So I tend to buy a lot of different values of red with different hue values to them, so that I have, you know, from dark to light, warm to cool values of red to work with. And so here I'm using the scarlet red as a lighter color, and you'll see I only put it in a few places. I don't cover everything with it. The red pencil is predominant, going to be the predominant color now, and I want to use this to create some lighter values. Not quite highlights, but getting close to that. Not liking that little shape I made there at the top of his cape. I think I paint that out. Yep. Also trying to think, if light is coming from in front of him, where would it hit, you know, the further back, and where would it not hit? I don't want to put that lighter color red somewhere that just doesn't make sense. I know his cape doesn't come up at points on his shoulders, but I just thought it looked cool, so. Again, I'm struggling with the texture on this, giving me some strokes that I don't particularly love, and had it been another character other than Spawn, it would have been really frustrating. But thankfully, it's been pretty well established by artists way better than I am that Spawn's cape a lot of times looks tattered and torn, and so it worked in my favor. In fact, I'll be honest, I borrowed this idea of the tattered torn cape. I have an original character that I'm working on behind the scenes, and his cape isn't like Spawn's where it basically seems alive, but it is basically a tattered, torn cape, and I'm not going to lie, I got the idea from looking at Spawn. I was like, I like that idea. I think it all works if you can make it work within your story, and hopefully with my original character the story will work, if I can ever figure the story out completely. Writing is not my strongest suit. Of course, you may be sitting here watching this and thinking, art's not my strongest suit either. Who knows? Getting some titanium white, and I'm going to mix that with the scarlet from Liquitex that I was just using, just to create a lighter value. I didn't want to get too much white in it because I did not want it to go to pink, but I didn't want to use yellow because I didn't want it to be a warm light coming. Yellow would have made it orange, which would give it more of a warm light. and I wanted to keep things more in the cool range. And here I'm being very, very selective where I put this color. I do not want it everywhere. Biggest temptation when you start laying it down, it looks so good when the paint's wet and the colors are just, you're seeing it in person and the colors are just looking great. You just like, oh, it looks good here. If a little looks good, a lot will look better. And you really have to resist that temptation and have a little bit of self-control and not just go hog wild and put it everywhere. All in all, I think I spent maybe 8 hours total on this. A few hours the night before and then a few hours the second night painting. Put away the paints and I've gotten out a color pencil and working on my rim light. This is a Prismacolor, very pale blue. I normally do this straight with brush, but because the texture has given me such a headache, I decided to try it with pencil. And it works okay. I do end up having to come back with some titanium white here in a minute and really kind of work it a little bit more. Not put titanium white everywhere, but just hit a few spots so that to make that rim light pop. I did commercial photography for several years. I was not overly successful with it, but I did try. And when I did photography, I always used a rim light. And so since I started drawing and painting, I try to always put a rim light on everything if it works within the drawing and the painting. Here I'm putting the light and I realized that I put it on the wrong side. So in a few minutes you'll see me come back with some red paint and paint over that, because it should not have been on the top half of that. It should have been on the bottom. When doing a rim light, you got to remember that it's not just on the back edge, it's actually going to wrap around your object. Your object is supposed to be a 3D object in space. And so you have to think about where would the light possibly come inside the edges and reflect back. And so that's why I'm putting those little bit of light color blues inside the folds of the cape. Here I'm coming back in with a titanium white and a very small round brush. Just really kind of pushing that rim light a little bit, make it pop a little bit more. The blue pencil did okay, but it was also kind of getting lost into the background, and so I needed something to kind of visually separate it. And audio on this is going to be a little weird because some of the audio towards the end is going to be recorded on my camera and some of this is being recorded on a microphone. So I'm not very good at this sort of thing, so forgive my learning curve. There I come back in with the red, painting over that part that I didn't mean to put white on. I tell you, white is an evil mistress. You start laying it down and it just looks so good, you get tempted just to put it everywhere. You gotta exercise some self-control. You can see me pausing and think, like, don't put too much white, don't put too much white. Now I've mixed some burnt umber and ultramarine blue to create a blackish glaze that I'm putting over the back of these tombstones. Really forcing them to be very, very dark. This may not be paintingly correct, as in, with no light reflecting on them. And, realistically, there probably would be some light reflecting back up on them from the ground or what have you. But I was going for simplicity and contrast. So I kind of wanted them to be there, but I didn't really want you to spend a lot of time looking at them. And putting them there gave me a cheat for the bottom of Spawn's Cape. I didn't have to worry about the ground or anything like that. So a little bit of a cheat on what I had to draw and paint. Right now I'm mixing some colors, and I'm sorry I can't show my palette at the same time I'm showing the canvas. But I am mixing up some grays that I will use to do the edges of the tombstone and cross. Trying to keep things in that cool category. Show a little bit of something without going crazy in the detail. Just enough that you know there's something there. Started on the right hand side, then thought better of it being right handed and moved over to the left. And again, this is probably not correct. I mean, I probably should have used different values of this. You know, for the top of that leaning tombstone versus the side, you know, the top should be a darker color, in all honesty. But again, this is supposed to be a sketch cover, and it's already taken longer than I imagined. So I'm trying to be reasonable in my time in doing this, because I have a ton more to do. And then I have several canvases that I'm supposed to be, you know, canvas size painting that I'm supposed to be working on. So time is a factor here. I make some mistakes on the cross and get it, you know, you can see it right there, you know, it just went a little too far out. So I had to come back and correct those shortly. Used to, when I started painting, if I made a mistake, I would just get so frustrated. A lot of times I'd just tear up the painting and throw it away. Over time, I've learned to correct mistakes and not stress out about it as much. Though there have been moments, even recently, where painting something would go so wrong, I had to stop myself from taking an X-Acto knife and tearing up a canvas, or, you know, picking up illustration board and ripping it in half and throwing it in the trash. Maybe I need to take an anger management course. I always keep a hair dryer handy. I actually have two in case that one conks out. Learned that from watching a video with Joe Jusko, him talking about his hair dryer quitting in the middle of the night and having to get up and find an all-night store to buy another hair dryer. I was like, I never want that to happen to me. I do tend to work late at night. I have a weird sleep schedule. I tend to go to bed about 1:30, maybe 12:30, but you know, between 12:30 and 1 either way, and I tend to wake up about 6. So I sleep about 5 to 6 hours a night. And then, you know, during the day, if I feel like I haven't had enough sleep at lunchtime, rather than eat lunch, I'll lay down and get an hour cat nap. I could do with skipping a meal or two, 3 or 4, 5 or 6. Here I'm using an unbleached titanium. I think it's what Liquitex calls it. Golden has another name for it. I can't remember what Golden calls it, but it's basically the same color. It's a very opaque color, and it's sort of a creamish color. I use it a lot in creating light tones in Caucasian flesh. A step between mid-tones and highlights. I'll use it a lot there. It works real well for me. I'm actually working on sketches for a painting that I want to do monochrome, and the only colors I'm going to use are going to be burnt umber, unbleached titanium, black, and white. And so hopefully that'll be where I can start actually painting on it here shortly. My next project that I'm going to be working on is a Phoenix sketch cover on a Age of Apocalypse. I was thinking about doing pencil, but, and I kind of talk about here at the end of the video, because I recorded on camera at the very end, that I might not do acrylics on one of these covers again, but this morning I've been thinking about it, and I'm like, you know what, it wasn't that bad. Maybe I'll do another acrylic painting. Maybe use less spray paint. Trying to create some texture on those tombstones. I should come back with some darker colors. I don't. But again, I didn't want a ton of detail down there anyway. So I'm okay with it. And here I'll come back in, I think, with the scarlet to clean up around that cross, which I kind of messed up a little bit. One thing I can say is paint on this dries pretty quick, even without the hair dryer. This time I've got a little bit of gray mixed with just a tad bit of titanium white, and I wanted to create a fog effect. Just a big brush and just a simple scumbling this in. Very, very little paint on the brush. This back of my tracing pad. Put a little paint on it, rub it off on the back of the tracing pad, apply it to the canvas, or the cover in this case. Got a little thick on the back tip of that cape, but it's all good. As Bob Ross would say, happy accidents. Now it's time to pick up the cover. I had a little more trouble getting this up than I realized, because I put so much tape down to hold the tracing paper. None of that tape is touching the comic book. None. But there's so much tape holding the tracing paper, and they're overlapping each other. I had a little bit of a hard time getting it out, because I'm trying not to tear the comic book as I'm doing this. The comic book collector in me just gets so sick when I see a damaged comic book that, you know, I was cringing getting this apart. But once I got one side done, yep, slid it out. And there it is. What do you know? Well, now it's finished for the most part. Still got to sign it, but I need to press it also. I need to get it flat. And so I press comics for my store, so I think I can press this if I'm really, really careful. I think I can press this. And you see I put lots of tracing paper down to protect the inside. But even still, you know, it got some little bit of... So a press will help all that go flat again. And then I can sign it. And then I have the question, do I gloss it? Well, that'll be for tomorrow. We'll see. All right, so last night I finished painting this, and I'm pretty pleased with the way it turned out. My desk is on a slant, everything wants to move. I'm really pleased with the way it turned out. Given the quality of the paper and the size I was painting and my level of experience as a painter, which is relatively new. I started teaching myself how to paint acrylics maybe 3 years ago, and no formal classes, so just been learning. So to come along in 3 years, pretty good. Especially the first year or so, I did, every now and then I would pick up acrylics. I wasn't really working hard at it. Only really got serious about learning acrylics in the last year. Experimented with a bunch of different mediums, but I'm pleased. It looks really good. Then once I got done, of course, this paper curled really bad. So, as I've said before, I own a comic book business, and we press our comics for sale before they go out on display with our customers. And so I just pressed it like I would a normal comic book, and got it nice and flat. And I think I put a gloss coating on it, give it a little bit of a sheen like a comic book's supposed to have. I think it looks really good. The only things I would do different next time is I wouldn't do as much splattering here. I went a little overboard, I think. I don't mind it in the background because I wasn't going to draw a background in, and it just adds interest back there. But I went a little overboard here. But overall, I'm pleased. I mean, it just looks like he's standing in this debris of stuff blowing in the wind. And I'm happy. I'm very happy. So this will go up in our display here soon, be up for sale. And I'm pretty happy. Now, will I do another one in acrylics? I don't know. There's a lot of time to get this done in acrylics. So I don't know if I'd do another one in acrylics or not. But for this one, I'm very happy. So, thanks for watching. Be kind, like and subscribe, comment below, whatever. Appreciate it. Take it easy.